Welcome to the presentation of the uh, encapsulated format on screen time and family life. We will have Ariadna Will here. Ariadna Will of the Barcelona Time Use Initiative for a Healthy Society. It's a pleasure to be here and to contribute to the conversation on something as important as young people's time and their relationship to screens. The Barcelona Time Use Initiative for a Healthy Society is about placing time use on the global agenda so that we all have a better use of time. It's good for all of us. That means from acting upon which time zones we live in to studying our habits and lifestyle, for instance, in relation to screen time and the impact that they have on our health. This event is held in the context of the Time Use Week, which is a whole week dedicated to raising awareness about the impact of time use on ourselves, our health, and our environment. There are a whole series of different events focusing on different aspects, and this particular panel is about screen time and its impact on family relations. This is a workshop co-organized with the Audiovisual Media Consumers Association of Catalonia, an organization we've been working with for a long time, and which produced this capsule or video. This organization adhered to the Pact for Time Reform, and it's one of the supporters of the audiovisual side of things. And it was also part of the four-part panel on time use, and it has adhered to the Barcelona Pact as well. In order to further describe the capsule we will be hearing later on, we have Luigi Bugaglia, who also took part in Time Use Week in 2018. Uh, to advocate for the campaign for earlier prime time, which was launched by the association. And from then on, the association has moved on to the responsible use of screens and how to responsibly uh, do audiovisual consumption. We will also hear from Ana Rivas of the Aprender a Mirar or Learn to Look Foundation or Learn to Watch Foundation. And she is coordinating an audiovisual program for young children. So there's a whole program that is for all sorts of people who have to do with children. And it's a program that, amongst other things, helps identify situations where children are at risk. So I'd like to start by welcoming Anna here. Thank you for being with us today. Anna is an expert teacher on responsible screen use in the Aprender a Mirar or Learn to Look Foundation. And we also have Luigi of the Audiovisual Media Consumers Association. We'll start by showing this encapsulated video, and then we will hear from Luigi and Anna, who will go into the subject somewhat more in depth. So let's have the video now, please. Video, please. Uh, Sorry, this interpreter can't hear the video. The video is inaudible to the interpreter. However, the interpreter will try to read from the script and hope that it's more or less in sync. Hello, I'm Estefania Gonzalez. I'm head of communication for the Catalan Association of Audiovisual Media Consumers of Catalonia. Within its audiovisual education program, I'm a teacher specializing in balanced use of screen time. The association is a fervent advocate of rationalization of audiovisual time. We're working to achieve good management of daily hours because, as our field work shows, responsible consumption is important. We need to find ways to make better use of screens, one that's environment friendly and healthy and good for us and for our environment. Video on demand platforms have drastically changed the paradigm of time in our lives. Our video consumption or audiovisual consumption hours no longer depend on when broadcasters choose to show things. We ourselves decide what and when to consume. And often, having so many options actually leads us to make unhealthy, imbalanced choices. So quite often, leisure is all about watching the latest season in a series that we'd been waiting to watch in binge marathons lasting whole nights or even whole weekends. Obviously, the time we spend when we increase the time we spend watching TV series or using our phones, we're spending less time on hobbies, on resting, with family members, with friends, or even spending less time on taking care of ourselves. In addition to this, uncontrolled consumption of audiovisual media entails certain risks, both for our relationships and for our own brain. Our association has studied the overuse of screens. It has been scientifically shown that more than 2 hours straight of screen consumption makes our brain tire and weaken. So the brain becomes accustomed to instant satisfaction and leads us to social isolation. In addition to other risks and impacts, we have loss of sleep quality and loss of the ability to concentrate. So, what can we do to manage screen time well? On the one hand, if we have young children, we have to set screen time hours and agree on them. One effective way to do that is a responsible use contract, which you can find and download in our website. But whether we want to educate our children or find our own personal balance, the first and foremost thing we need to go for is self control and setting an example. We need to self assess and assess a level of well being that balances everything with family and friends. How do we self assess? Through the campaign called Live Your Real Life, the association is calling everybody to take action and to take stock. First, we have the techno test, which raises our awareness of our degree of addiction to mobile phones. Then we have the test en serie, the serial test, which opens our eyes to how much we're over consuming serial fiction. Lastly, we can also test ourselves using the echo test, which helps us uh, go back or put screens back in their proper place after increased consumption during lockdown. So, what are the next important steps in terms of effective management of screens in the family setting? We have 6 practical points of advice, which are as follows. First of all, we have to organize time through schedules and setting of boundaries and limits. Our recommendation is that you use the family contract for mobile use, which is available from our association's website. That can help you discuss the matter and reach agreements. Second, don't use screens just before going to bed because they impact quality of sleep. Besides, as a result of that, parents might end up sleeping while children are still using screens. How can we prevent this? We can create a mobile parking spot where we can put down our cell phones when it's no longer time to use them. Also, games consoles and screens should never be in the bedrooms of underage children. They should be in shared rooms in the household. Third recommendation, Wi-Fi should be switched off at night. Mobile phones and screens must have a time and a place assigned. For instance, you could say no screens during meal times. Fifth, we have to prioritize personal relations and well-being. We have to set example. We shouldn't binge watch series ourselves or use our own mobile phones while we're having a meal with the family. Sixth and last, it's really important to spend time discussing how we relate to screens. We need to address any conflicts, manage difficulties, uh, change whatever isn't working, and decide what content to watch as a family. For that particular purpose, you can go to our content section called contraste.info, where you will find analyses of movies, series, and video games from an educational perspective. So, how do you, audiovisual consumer, think we can achieve healthier audiovisual consumption? What action are you taking? What is its effect on your work-life balance? We'd like to encourage you to share your opinions through labels and through comments in our social media or by contacting us directly. In our website, you will find a contact form, our email address, and so forth. We're always available to answer your questions, provide advice, or help you with anything to do with audiovisual media. We'd like to thank you lastly for your attention and hope these few minutes have helped you take stock and become aware of the time spent on screens. Thank you very much. So we've had the opportunity to see this launch of a information video. And without further ado, I'll hand over to Luigi. Okay, Adriana, thank you very much. Chiefly, well, thank you for giving us this opportunity to tell you about this uh, project. I'd like to devote just 3 minutes to telling you about the purpose of our association. In June of 2018, media viewers asked for prime time to be moved forward because rationalization of TV prime time makes it easier for families to ha- have a better balance. It wasn't the very first time we placed time use at the center of the debate. It was back in 2017 that after the study of prime time in Spain, prime time which has no kind of regulation, it was as a result of that study that we started tackling the issue of prime time. In 2018, we also adhered to the Compact for Time Use Reform so that we could increase rest time at home and promote a new culture of time. But it was last year, 2019, when, having become aware of the difficulties involved in our objectives, we updated our social project for reforming audiovisual time. So now the main aim of our association is not just to achieve a balancing sort of prime time, but also to ensure that in this context, when people are spending more and more time watching video and content on demand, well, it's really important to take stock of its role within our time. And so we created one short capsule of we call them this particular issue. These are short videos. Capsules are short videos in which teachers working for the association provide advice and tips and information to achieve healthy, responsible audiovisual consumption for the sake of our children. This innovative project arose out of the need to support parents who have seen the screen use of their children increase significantly during the pandemic. You can find the whole playlist for all of our capsules in our YouTube channel. We've also done some work in Spanish, so we produced some of these videos in Spanish together with the Aprender a Mirar Foundation, also joined here, which also joins us here. So there's something else. With a few questions, I think we might be able to learn a bit more. These are three very simple questions, and we would really like you to answer them so that we can get an idea of who our audience is. First question. How would you describe yourself or your organization? Researcher, parent, grandparent, teacher, educationalist, journalist, NGO worker. Uh, Are you a consumer, an audiovisual consumer, as we are? I mean, those of us who are in this association really like audiovisual content, and that's why we demand quality and the right kind of content for every profile. Second question. Do you think you're using screens appropriately? Is that a yes? Is that a no? Is that not sure? Is that there's always room for improvement? Okay. Now, third question. Do you think you have managed to achieve a good use of screens in the family sphere? That one's not easy to answer either. So also, no, yes, no, not sure, no reply, um, continues to improve. So now we want our team to collect the data. In the meantime, I will tell you that Anna and myself will be focusing on certain contents that could be of interest for everyone. One of our main guiding ideas is that the issue of screens is also framed by the risk of not using them properly. And that risk is tied in with lack of information about the content. For instance, if I were to ask you who Sorius or Dulceida or Fortnite or Degeta are, well, maybe some people here don't have a clue what I'm talking about, but every teenager knows who I'm talking about. They're major influencers. They're about huge, really big video games. And Anna here today will be helping us understand a little bit better what the consequences are of overuse of screens, the consequences to the brain. Okay, good afternoon. Thank you. And yes, I will tell you about how screens affect our brain. First thing, we have to realize that screens are here to stay. We're having this webinar thanks to the use of screens. And we have screens nowadays in our living rooms, in our offices, in our bedrooms, in our purse. We have screens about us at every time. Now, I would like to draw a distinction between active and passive screens. Active screens are screens where we play an active role, screens where we interact. For instance, any screens for video games, screens used for social media. And then we have passive screens, screens where we take a a passive attitude before them. You know, screens where we're watching a movie or a series. Of course, activity or passivity is not necessarily tied to the device. We can use our tablet, computer, or a laptop, or whatever, or a phone to either watch a video or watch a movie, or to play a game. So it's not about the device, it's about what we do with it. Let me tell you about what happens to our brain when we're watching something on a screen. So, first of all, let's draw that distinction between active and passive watching because the way our brain receives the information is very different. Now we're going to have a little game. Think of your favorite food, say paella or paella. What amount of paella would you be ready to eat? Would you have 2 dishes? 2 platefuls? You'd probably be full by then. Usually, by the time we've eaten, say 1 dish to 1.5 dishes, 1 serving to 1.5 servings, we've usually had enough. At that point, the stomach sends a signal to the hypothalamus of the brain and tells us we're sated. What's the problem here? There is nothing about screens to tell us we've had enough. Sometimes with some of my students, I joke, what happens if they're well, their satedness signal is a parent saying, "You've had enough. Stop watching." But in actual fact, there's nothing to automatically tell us. Why do we like these screens so much? Well, when we're watching something on a screen, cortisol comes into play. It makes us concentrate. Think of dopamine. Dopamine is called the pleasure hormone. Now, dopamine is what makes us really like stuff. So when somebody clicks on like for something of ours, well, that gives us a little dopamine. If we are served food that we would really like very much, well, we get that little dopamine hit. When we watch a series we enjoy, we get a little dopamine hit. What's the problem? In the case of active screens, for instance, if we're playing a video game, the amount of dopamine received by our brain is considerable. So, how long can we keep watching that screen? If we keep the dopamine coming at us at too fast a pace, we can make the brain sort of drunk on dopamine or high. And what happens then? Well, it weakens our brain, our neurons, and that can be very detrimental in the long term. In the long term, so we really have to be careful about our screen time when we're reading a book or leafing through a magazine. Our brain is in wave has beta waves, but our brain switches to alpha mode when we relax. But the problem is that all the information that we receive through the screen just really seeps in.
Of time to an active or a passive screen because when we're using an active screen, the dopamine reception is much higher than when we're using a passive screen. If we are watching a TV show or a film, we're going to spend a couple of hours watching that. But if we are watching how people like our content, the amount of dopamine is very high. There's something else that we suggest from our foundation. The brain needs some rest. And obviously, when the brain is active, is during the night. If we're watching a screen in an active fashion before we go to bed, we're activating cortisol, dopamine, adrenaline. So our brain is saturated with all of that substance, and it's hard for it to get some rest. And then in the morning, you're tired, you haven't rested properly, so you need to be responsible and control screen time before going to bed. We need to be uh, rested. There are a lot of things that can be done other than watching a screen. So that's what we recommend, to oversee screen time before bed so that we can enjoy that part of the day, so that our brain can be really rested and unplugged from everything. When we're watching a TV show, which is a passive screen, we are on an alpha mode. Our brain receives that information. We release dopamine, and we like that. So I'm sure that this has happened to you before. For instance, a line by an actor, or something that was said during a commercial that you remember. Burger King, the taste is in. Probably you know how to finish that sentence, right? Same thing goes for other famous words. These are famous slogans that have been used in commercials we've watched all of our lives. And this happens because when we're watching a passive screen, the frontal part of our brain switches off, and then the lower part of the brain receives that information. And it doesn't process information as real. It reads that as fictional. So we might think that the actions that are taking place in that particular show, film, or commercial are real. And this influences younger kids mostly because they're watching situations they believe to be true. Even things that can be detrimental to them, well, they see them as normal. So we need to remember that even though sometimes we don't think that's the case, everything rubs off on you. There are a lot of famous slogans that kind of stick to your head, unbeknownst to you. Now, what is the threshold age? As of which age can we use screen, or can we allow our kids to use screen? When they are 1, can they watch a screen? And I'm sure that Lucy will tell us, will give us some hints about what's the proper age for a child to start using screens. Anna, thank you for your explanation. Now that you are switching mics, I have to say that we already have the results of the survey that Luigi read out earlier. So we can tell you what those results are, and I'm sure that Luigi will tell us more about them. First question. Hopefully you will get to see this on your screen. Which was, how would you describe yourself or your organization? I don't see the results here on the screen. It's blank. I can see the graph, but there are no data. Okay. Well, apparently most people define themselves as part of the press. Hopefully we'll get to see this soon. Okay, I can see here that most people believe that they do not use screens wisely. 77% say they don't, and 33% believe that they use them adequately. And the third question, which we will see momentarily, whether you believe that screens are properly used amongst family members. We can see that 14% claim that's the case. The majority of respondents say no, once again, 71%. and there's another 14% that are more skeptical and therefore they're not sure. So, Luigi, I give you the floor so you can comment on those results. Thank you, Ariadna. Well, we can see how difficult it is to make decisions, right? In this field of screens, it is a tough choice. And it's one of the contributions of our organization with members of civil society. We are usually parents and we're concerned about how to educate and train our kids. So here we are. We hope that you can count on us to learn and to learn how to take that decision in a more informed fashion. I think this comes very handy in order to give some suggestions. We're not inventing anything from scratch. We use scientific methods. The American Pediatrician Association also offers some information about this, which is how can we adjust the screen time adequately based on age. You will see it's quite interesting because what the specialists are suggesting is that from 0 to 2 years old, nothing at all in terms of screen time, zero time, zilch, not a second. So, do you think this is too radical? Maybe it is, but the child is developing. Their brain needs to be fully present and integrated into their environment without being distracted by those signals. And then they'll learn about passive and active screens from 2 to 5, between 30 minutes and an hour a day. From 6 to 12, 1 hour with an adult present, and never during meals. From 12 to 15, 1.5 hours. And very carefully regarding social networking sites. And then as of 16 years, 2 hours, but taking good care of leaving screens off bedrooms, because obviously internet holds everything together, both good and bad. So they can also bump into that as well. Now, what is the age in which we can give a screen, tablet, or cell phone freely to the kid? Well, it depends on how mature they are. There are children that once they're 7 or 8, they think a certain way. So you can trust them to be reasonable about the amount of time. Whereas there are other older kids, I don't know, 15 or 16, and you just cannot trust them, right? So it depends on the specific person and whether they have evolved and matured. What else, Anna? Uh, how can we improve screen time use, and what are the benefits that this can bring? Well, I think that people who are following this event might be scared by now, because you just said that until they turn 3, young kids cannot use any kind of screen, right? Well, it's a difficult choice, especially now with the coronavirus crisis. Many people staying at home with their children, and some of them are hooked on a screen. We've had a lot of time in our hands, and I'm sure that they've abused screens of late. So many people say that's the case, that we are abusing our screen time. Well, screens are extremely good because they can give us a lot of information. We use them when we are working. Thanks to screens, we can be talking to you today. However, we need to know how to use them. We need to consider why we're using it, what we're using it for, what content, and the age of the user, as Luigi was saying. They are a great educational opportunity. Screens are entertaining. You have a lot of fun with them. They provide a lot of information. I tend to tell my students that if they are studying a history lesson, there are a lot of history shows they can follow, or they can watch their favorite content in a different language to learn how to speak that language. There's a lot of arts and crafts shows and content. It's a great opportunity. So screens can educate. I'm a mother to 2 young children, and during lockdown, I thought, well, I don't know, either I give them something or I won't have time for anything else. So you need to give them opportunities. Uh, Once you know what you're offering your kids, they're great they're a great tool, and we have a very broad variety of content. The problem is that we use them a lot. And even though we make a good use of a screen, other people will abuse it, and this will be detrimental. So we need to control an excessive amount of time, wasting time with screens, or as we were saying earlier, if you're playing a game and you spend an hour and a half, 2 hours tops, you need to take a rest for a couple hours because there are so many other activities that you can do. Obviously, learning, studying, and everything needs to be considered. We need to know what kind of programs or contents we're watching, whether the content is adequate, is age appropriate, uh, to know what kind of information is being conveyed. And as you were saying earlier, when you spend time with your family and you're watching a screen, it's important to watch those shows, cartoons, and films with our children to speak about them. We at the foundation have certain guidelines and tests that we provide. I encourage you to go to our website and go over them because you can learn a bit more about devices and screens and how to spend that time with your children. On our website, there are experts that review TV shows, video games, movies. So if your son or daughter is playing a game, you should know about what that game is all about, and to know more about it, because screens, especially with social media, there might be a lot of people using them that are quite young. So these are significant topics that we need to be aware of, and they travel fast. Everybody can get hooked on a specific game overnight. Cyberbullying can also be an issue. So we need to help parents make good use of screens because, as I said, they are a very powerful tool as well. Something else I'd like to underscore is at our foundation, Learning How to Look, we have a campaign that aims to raise awareness about the place we occupy in the virtual sphere. We need to be aware of what we're doing on our screens of our virtual life and our real life as well. So we need to be fully in control of our lives so that we can make our own decisions. Is it are we controlling our own screens, or do they control us? Because it's a slippery slope. So this campaign, Lead Your Real Life, using this hashtag, you can contribute to it. And it's important to raise awareness amongst people to lead their own lives, not only in social media. Many people have a double life when they participate in these social media, right? And they claim to have been in spectacular places and travel around. We follow people who do. We would love to have their life, but it's not our real life. So we need to bear that duality in mind. It's important to curb the time, to reduce the time we spend in front of a screen, and to know what kind of content we are consuming. Where our children are using social media, with what friends are they playing. So we should analyze how we're using our own screens and whether we're doing things properly so that we can be a role model to younger people. If we do that correctly, we can teach them how to control this themselves, to become aware of how long they spend in front of a screen, and to somehow limit that time. I think it's important to spend 1 hour, 1.5, 2 hours at the very most every day because of the amount of dopamine that the brain is infused in. Otherwise, it gets really high on dopamine, and it has to get that out of the system because otherwise, you won't have enough energy to study later. Our brain cells are not ready. They will feel drowsy. They won't be able to study and to absorb new knowledge. So, screen screen time must happen after study time, not the other way around. I encourage you to go to our foundation's website and you can carry out the tests that we provide and try to lead your real life in everything you do, both in the digital sphere and obviously in real life. Maybe we can take some questions, Luigi, during the Q&A session, if there are questions from the audience. Sure. Um, Thanks for noticing because we are approaching the end of this event. So I think it's nice to take this as by way of conclusion. They were asking, how can we detect a certain abuse or a possible addiction to screens amongst our children? Well, screen dependence, as I was saying, it depends on the time spent every day. So one needs to exert control, but also self-control. The person themselves need to know how to manage that. It is very difficult, mind you. We use screens for everything. I was with a guy the other day, with a boy, and he said that he got his homework through his cell phone. He was sent homework over the phone. So it's quite tough, especially when you have a young person who is so dependent on screens that they start crying when you take the cell phone away from them, or they start shouting, screaming. They're always edgy. They feel anti. Well, this happens all the time. We at the foundation tend to advise, we give some pointers that can be useful to avoid that kind of addiction. We offer help to control that excessive use of screens, but most of all, we need to control time and to use tools properly. There's one thing I'd like to say. You can, for instance, write up an agreement. If you come to an agreement with your kid, you can state exactly when they can use their cell phone. For instance, never in their bedroom, always in a shared space, or how long can they use them after high school or after school. That is a great way to work on it. You need to anticipate that uh, techno addiction, that excessive use of screens, especially when you can see that they're very nervous when you take their cell phone away from them or their tablet, any kind of device. That is one of the first indicators. There's a model contract, right? An agreement that you can download from your website, which can be very helpful when trying to express that commitment, right? Yes, indeed. Well, thank you both for your answers. I thought this was a very interesting session. You gave a lot of resources, ideas, and advice to families that need to face this every day. It's a new thing, so many of us don't know how to cope with this. I just wanted to say that if there's anyone who would like to be in touch with our great team of experts that can go to your school to give a public lecture or a company, we're here to help, or even to talk to families or friends and eat something together and talk about this. It's very important. It's part of what we do. So please do so if you want to contribute.
And I'll just remind you of the URL for the website of the association, audioconsumidores.cat, and of course the foundation also has plenty of resources on its own website. If anybody wanted to follow this chat and was unable to, well, bear in mind that the YouTube recording will be there, so you can forward the link to anybody you think might be interested in this. Without further ado, I'll just give our two speakers a minute each in case there's one take home message they want to leave us with. Luigi, you have the floor. Well, I just wanted to say that we all need help. dealing with screens. Now we can see that from both the questions and the answers given by our audience. It's a complex matter, so if you take it on with humility, it helps you find solutions. I want to emphasize how vulnerable people are when they're receiving all that information from screens. I mean, screens are great, but you have to use them properly and be aware of the risks. Okay, thank you, Anna. So those are my two take-home messages. Everybody's different. We need to understand the individual and how to address things with them and know that there is no single magic recipe. We need to work our way through it gradually and slowly. Thank you very much for taking part in this Time Use Week and hope we'll see you soon. Thank you. Thank you very much. See you. Bye. Okay, that's it. Anna, is there anybody else out there? Hello? Bueno, no sé si ens sentiu. Bé, tinc la sensació que no fem més falta. Tanco navegador i demà serà un altre dia. Si ens voleu dir alguna cosa, ens la podeu dir pel grup del xat. Alguna cosa. Vale, doncs apa.